Welcome to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnet, the podcast exploring the meaning of love, life, and money. I'm your host, Suresh, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. To those of you who are listening for the first time, I'm so glad you're here. Today, we have a very special guest, my friend Rebecca Sophia Strong, who embodies the journey from chaos to cosmos. She's a visionary artist with training in cultural anthropology, sociology, ecology, dance, cosmology, and psychology. Her mission is to amplify health and intelligence, creating pathways towards a flourishing future for all. She is also a meditator, dancer, Aikido practitioner, embodiment guide, and social artist. Nominated for the MacArthur Fellowship and TEDx speaker, Rebecca Sophia has collaborated with institutions like Ithaca College and University of Colorado Boulder. Join us as we explore Rebecca Sophia's journey and insights. Welcome to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnet, and welcome to Rebecca Sophia Strong. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. You could be New York City, you could be in Sydney, Australia, you could be in Nepal, England. I have no idea because my friends, you are everywhere. I'm today with my own friend, Rebecca Sophia Strong. I've been lucky to meet her and get to know her and learn so much from her. So today we will have a lot of discussion, so stay tuned. We're going to first start with the meditation, then we'll begin our conversation. So together, let's close our eyes. Breathe in from nose and breathe out from your mouth 3 times. Pay attention to the breath. And if you driving, please don't close your eyes and listening this podcast, but you can do everything else. And let's quickly feel how our body is feeling from head to toe. Quickly observe and see if you feel any kind of sensation, whether tingling, itching, stress, tightness, pleasure, anything. Make sure that our shoulders are relaxed. Move your shoulder a little bit. Make sure they're loosened up. Make sure that your spinal cord is straight and erected. Make sure that your feet are on the floor and grounded. And keep breathing. This is our time. Just for yourself, for us, this is a moment for us to connect with ourselves and each other. Everything else can wait until later. We're trying to be at the present moment. That means you stay with us. And stay with yourself. If you stay with yourself, then you're staying with us. Keep breathing. We'll breathe 3 more times, then slowly we'll open our eyes. One more. Thank you. Thank you again, Rebecca Sophia. Such a delight to have a conversation that touches and impacts many people here and around the world. Your background is amazing. You have been studying and practicing cultural anthropology, sociology, and psychology. And I'm curious how they have influenced your life in terms of love and relationship, and also a little bit, why did you decide to become a therapist?
Thank you, Suresh. It's so lovely to be with you, and I love meditating with you. It just drops me right down into my being and my body and my heart. So thank you. Yeah. Cultural anthropology, I just have always had such a voracious curiosity about people. And when I grew up in the Great Lakes region and right across the Lake Ontario from the city of Toronto, which is a very international city. And I grew up going to the great wonder of the world, Niagara Falls, both the US and Canadian side. And I remember as a kid seeing busloads of people come and look at the Niagara Falls, and as a 6-year-old, kind of being in the swirl of human diversity and just being completely lit up and curious and turned on, and had the honor to later study cultural anthropology in undergrad, which then before and after my degree, I got to travel and live overseas. So there's just always been this passion around people and culture, and later studying psychology of like what motivates people, how do people choose to do what they do. Yeah, so the intersection of that has always kind of compelled me.
Just curious, what are some of the countries you have gone in the past?
Sure. Well, as a kiddo, into Canada a lot, so I got used to crossing borders and being welcomed by other cultures. As a 16-year-old, I spent a year as a Rotary Youth Exchange student in the down under country of Australia.
What?
Yeah, and then later, right after undergrad, I moved to Japan and I lived in Japan for 2 years and traveled through Asia. So on my way home from those 2 years of living in Japan, I backpacked through China, Tibet, Nepal, India, and Thailand. I started my trip from Japan on a boat that went through the Sea of Japan to Tianjin.
Wow.
And I was married at the time, and my husband at the time and our goal was to take as few flights as possible. So we went from Kobe to Tianjin by boat, and then we went all over China by train, ended up flying into Lhasa, Tibet, going all the way to Western Tibet by car, and then actually by foot from Tibet into Nepal, and then by car from Kathmandu over to Pokhara, and then up by foot around the Annapurna region for 21 days, and then
21.
back to
Oh, wow.
21-day trek. Yeah.
Wow. Wonderful. Wow. So it looks like you know probably more about trekking in Nepal than I do, even though I'm from there.
Imagine that.
My goodness. How old you were when you went all of that?
Let's see. Good question. I was 22
Wow.
when I, 22? Yeah, 22 when I moved to Japan, and 24 when I
Wow.
was traveling through
Wow.
Asia.
Backpacking all of in that age.
Backpacking, yeah. 6-month backpack journey. It really changed my life. It created a global citizenship feeling for sure, and that trip has influenced the rest of my life so far, for sure. Yeah.
With that background, and also you have worked as a visionary artist as well, right? How that have shaped your connection of love and human in general, and why did you start that process? And because you have incorporated many things to get to what you are, so that's why maybe why you're so good at what you do.
Mm. Thank you. So I think, to answer your question, I've been 4 different times I've been on kind of multicultural teams of people, starting when I was 16 in Australia. There were 56 exchange students from 14 different countries.
Oh, wow.
And we traveled together for 10 days at a time, 4 different times over the course of a year. And we had to learn how to work together, and we had people facilitating us that brought out our strengths. And so I fell in love with these kind of cross-cultural groups and collaborations and teams of people. I also had that in Japan. I worked in a language lab with teachers from all over the world, and we were there in support of our Japanese clients. But we would play ping pong and do potlucks and have dance parties, all with very, different cultural perspectives in a spirit of celebration. And you asked about the visionary artistry. I just wrote a screenplay where there are 8 characters, and it's a very diverse group of characters. Lotus and her 5 peers kind of mimic the diverse teams that I have been on in my lifetime.
Wow. Why all this character from the different country or characters? So how did you come up with that idea?
Well, I have to say, I'm in love with this particular planet. And I like to say, planet Earth speaks in 2 languages. It speaks in biological diversity, and humans travel all over the world to experience, the rainforest, the great oceans, the great wonders of the world, like Niagara Falls and other places, right? It's like we are obsessed with this gorgeous biological diversity. And the other language the Earth speaks is social diversity or cultural diversity. And both are being threatened right now, but it is the thing that makes us unique. And it's the thing that the Earth does automatically. And I believe at our core, human beings love that. Love diversity, love nuance, love differences. And so I feel compelled to help protect it and amplify it and celebrate what's possible in the bridging between differences. Yeah.
So you must have a really great understanding of humans, regardless wherever they're from, with your background traveling around the world, and your curiosity to understand humans and human behaviors. Can you share your inspiration? Why became you trauma resolution psychotherapist or therapist in general? And how do you help people? Why you decide to become?
I found this on the web for your inspiration. Why became you trying to listen psychotherapist? That was great. You can just ask Siri. She'll answer.
This is the funniest thing. We should just leave it the way it is.
Totally. I think so. People will
This is
get a
cool.
kick out of it.
No, now we have a 3-way conversation. Siri,
Yes, we do.
you and me.
That's right. It's probably
It's funny.
more accurate More accurate, isn't it? Yeah, I became a psychotherapist. Honestly, it started with my own. It started with getting kind of being able to face my own personal emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a lot of loss in my early childhood, and then things that happened in my family that were very unfortunate. And while I was prepared in a lot of ways by my mom to take good care of myself,
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways that I wasn't prepared was in the realm of psychology, of mental
Mm-hmm.
health, of mental fitness, of how do we grieve, how do we repair. So I kind of got into my early 20s and was facing a lot of emotional pain from not having worked through the difficulties and the adversity in my childhood. So here's where Nepal comes in, which is a huge part of how I actually became a psychotherapist. I was trekking in the Annapurna region. And, when you're trekking up in this region, you're going from guest house to guest house, and there's, different groups of people, and you kind of like leapfrog with them. Well, I had just been to the Potala Palace in Tibet, and in the basement of the Potala Palace, there is a museum of all of the Dalai Lamas, and there are wax figures of each of the different Dalai Lamas. And for some reason, while I was there, I remember the fifth Dalai Lama. Like, his face just kind of really stood out to me. And it turns out like he helped end a particular war that was happening in that region. That's kind of what he's known for, is the restoration of peace. And maybe it was his story that made me remember him. Well, fast forward about 2 months later, I'm hiking in the Annapurna region in Nepal, and this little 5'2" Dutch woman with yellow hair that immediately made me think of the fifth Dalai Lama. She literally came up to me and tapped me on my shoulder, and she took her backpack off and she took out the Tibetan book of living and dying. She's like, you have to read this book. Oh, wow. She's like, I'm hearing from somewhere that you have to read this book. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I took the book and I looked at the book and I made a note of it mentally and gave it back to her. And she put it back in her bag and took off. Suresh, this happened. I am not kidding you. In 21 days, this happened to me 5 times. This same Dutch woman coming up to me again. We're leapfrogging these different groups and people on the trail. And there she is again. And she's like, I don't know what's going on, but I keep getting the message like, you have to read this book. And so by the 3rd time this happened, I said, I promise. Wow. As soon as I go to Pokhara or Kathmandu, I promise I will get a copy of this book. It happened 2 more times. So the first thing I did when I got off the 21-day circuit was I went to Pokhara and I found a copy. And I think it was like 6 rupees or 96 rupees. It was like,
rupees, yes.
Yeah. And I remember getting the book. And when I got back to the United States, I went to visit my mom in New York State. And I spent the month of January reading the Tibetan book of living and dying. And here's where my career kind of dharmic path comes in. Sogyal Rinpoche, who is noted for starting the hospice movement in the UK and then thus influencing the hospice movement in North America, said, according to Buddhist teachings, when we experience personal pain, we can feel motivated to work through it. And we can dedicate that motivation towards the healing of suffering, the healing of others' suffering, that pain is not wasted time when we decide that our own liberation is tied up in the liberation of others. And if we can work our own way through adversity and difficulty, then we actually have something that we can offer to other people. And I really do believe in that we are all connected, and that, to be of service is where the meaning is at. To be able to show up for someone else while they're in pain, to know from my own personal experience that we can get through these things, we can do hard things, we can learn new skills, we can learn to grieve, we can learn to process difficulty, and we can also heal. We can also heal our brains, we can heal our neurophysiology, and we can become more resilient and more strong and even more purposeful going forward. And that moment in time was a massive shift for me, because it went from kind of chaos to cosmos for me, meaning kind of, as a kid, you're going, why is there all this pain, or why is there all this suffering, or is it worth it? Is it worth sticking around if this is what life means? And there was something about the way Sogyal Rinpoche spoke about the Buddhist philosophies around pain, working through suffering, that this is a part of life, that death is a part of life. The Buddhists were the only ones talking about death also.
Yes.
Like, it's much more, commonly spoken of now, but
Yeah.
this happens. And he helped me, and that book really helped me kind of start to make peace with, my father died as a toddler. I'd gone through a lot of loss in the first 16 years of my life. And nothing in the West, no Western tool helped me understand what to do with that.
Oh, wow.
Other than to just experience it. And I really wanted to transmute it and turn it into something useful, something practical, in a way that I could be a participant and a contributor in my local community and with the people I love.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about grief and your own experience losing your father when you were a toddler. But sometimes different cultures have a different interpretation of the experience of grief or feelings and all of that. Can you give us maybe a foundational idea about what is grief, how does it rise, and how we can work through therapy, or how does the healing process look like?
Sure.
Just the grief, what it is, and what's good thing about grief, or how we can work through, so that actually it can be part of developing your own wisdom.
Sure. Oh, I love the question. That's a beautiful question. I think, the first thing that comes to mind is, like, grief is a signal of love. Grief is our signal that we have loved deeply, that we have loved, and that the loss of a person that we love, or a home that we loved, or a grandmother, a dog, it's really a signal that we're alive, and that we chose to take a risk to open our heart to let this other impact us and influence us. And it's a natural process, like a deciduous tree, right? In the spring the leaves sprout, in the summer everything gets in full bloom, and in the fall the energy starts to go back down to the root, the leaves fall to the ground, the leaves compost into the soil, and that composting then feeds back into the source, into the root structure. Everything in nature, I think, has this cyclical tendency. And I believe grief is a natural part of emotional hygiene. It's a natural part of any life cycle. And it also can be such a good teacher, because it teaches us about how we love, what's important to us, what's meaningful, what's most valuable. And it helps us when we can really slow down, like the Western world likes to speed up and numb out in relation to
Yes.
grief.
Yeah.
But when we have the courage to turn toward it, it can be such an illuminator, such a teacher of what's most important. It can actually help us make better decisions going forward, or it can give us courage.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And usually, generally speaking, women are much better in grieving process than we men. I'm curious if you have come across with that issue generally, because we're, as men, we are always trained to be not to show any emotions and keep everything down so that we never really go through the healing process. Many of us, not all of us, but many of us. And how do you work with your clients about, with men or women generally who don't understand the benefits of counseling or grieving process? How do you work with clients and how do you approach them?
Well, at this point in my work, people tend to approach me. Sometimes there will be a loved one that says, go,
Yeah, yeah,
go to
yeah, yeah.
therapy, go to counseling. But at this point in my work, people come because there's a willingness. It's very difficult to kind of open the process, so to speak, if there isn't that that willingness. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you that grieving and feeling pain is part of the human experience, and it's normal to feel that way for both men and women. If we feel and process and heal, then we'll get to the other side, which will be better in
Mm.
the long run.
It makes us more better in the long run, and it makes us more integrated. We understand that emotions, like if we block ourselves from feeling
Mhm,
pain or
mhm,
anger or sadness or
mhm,
grief, we
mhm,
are also limiting our capacity for celebration, joy,
mhm,
contentment.
mhm,
It's all of that is true.
mhm,
I will go back to your question for a moment, because one of the things that I have found when there is grief, for example, a client who lost a child at the age of 61, but
oh wow.
had actually lost many people, but maybe had been moving so quickly with his career and with raising a family that learning and the practices of grieving were not passed down or taught to him. One of the things that helped was kind of tapping into, and this might sound a little woo woo, but it's
Mm,
helpful to find allies in the journey. And I
mm,
find that even people who feel very isolated can find at least one or two allies, whether it's a pet
mm,
or a favorite place in nature. And to go another layer deeper right here, oftentimes people will have an ancestor that was like a role model to them, or played a significant role in their early childhood. And if you can somehow bring that ancestor into mind, into your heart, into meditation, into the room, it can kind of create enough support for the grieving to happen. So, in order to grieve, it's really helpful to feel supported. And honestly, when we kind of pull in allies who are either still in their body or not, it helps to create a container that we can relax into. And when we feel like we are inside of a container or something that is holding us on some level, it actually allows for that opening and that healing to happen.
mm, wow, wow. We talked about little bit wisdom and what insight you have gained from you facilitate the women of wisdom groups and how it has deepening your understanding of love and belongings.
Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, love and belonging.
Those are my favorite topic.
Yes. Those are the best topics on the planet, Suresh. Love and belonging. Yeah. Well, I think I do. I run a 6-month women's program called Women of Wisdom. And it's not a therapy group and it's not a coaching group. It's more of a community-based co-creative think, as a clinician working one-on-one with someone in a room isolated, there can be this belief that grows in people of, well, she gets me, or she accepts me, or in this context, I feel safe. But when I go out into the world, or I go back to work, or I go back to my household, I don't necessarily feel that. So I create group environments for people to experience, to gain a direct experience of love and belonging, because that, when we tie our lives to something bigger than us, it kind of breaks the bonds with dysfunctional thinking, or dysfunctional or limiting worldviews, or like the Buddhists call them kleshas. And I believe that in group, some people say that the next Buddha is the Sangha, that it's the community spaces where we actually do the most remarkable, most authentic, most transformational kinds of healing, because we get to, when done well, which is a big piece, when done well, there can be a shared humanity in the space. Like, we talk about grief together and everyone shares their grief. They go, oh, this isn't just mine. This is human. This is a shared experience. It normalizes various experiences. It gives us more courage. It kind of lets us take up more space. And again, that's a container that's bigger than us that we can surrender into, that gives us some things that we need to do life well.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, we need a big container so that we can feel safe and we can expand. And talking about that, yes, you mentioned about from chaos to cosmos, and can you explain how evolutionary cosmology provides a framework for understanding our place and purpose in our universe?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Can I start with a personal story?
Of course. That's what I love. Really stories.
You love a personal story. Okay, yes. Great. So here's how I like to talk about how evolutionary cosmology changed my life and how it ignited such a fierce passion in me that I've been working with ever since. So when I was 18, the container that was my family of origin, it shattered. And that sent me on a journey of world travel, of studying psychology, of my own therapeutic process. And I was in search of meaning, in search of wholeness, in search of wisdom, in search of where is the sanity. Like, that felt so destabilizing and so crazy making that I kind of went deep into myself and deep into the world looking for answers. So when I met evolutionary cosmology, and I will say through the teachings of mathematical physicist and evolutionary cosmologist Brian Swim, as soon as I heard his voice, I knew there was something he was talking about that would become very significant to me. And I spent 10 years in personal deep study. And what evolutionary cosmology did to me was like took the vase of my life, or the vase of my life that had been shattered, right? Up until then, my sense of belonging was limited to my family of origin and maybe my local community, right? And when that shattered and opened me up to the world, what happened when the 13.8 billion year story of the universe came in, it was like the gold that filled in my kintsugi pottery. Are you familiar with that? Kintsugi is like a Japanese form of pottery where they make a vase and then they shatter it. And then they fill in the cracks with this gold, and it becomes an even more beautiful vessel
Wow.
than it
Yes.
was
Ah,
when
yes.
it began, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So cosmology, we've talked a little bit about containers and contexts. I love containers and contexts because things become very interesting and intentional. So when I found the story of the universe, the scientific story of the universe, it was like all of these shattered pieces got to be reformulated into a much bigger and, I would say, more beautiful container that has become my life, right? Or that is my life. And it created a way of understanding the bigger timeline, the bigger process that life has been on. Like, so if we believe that the scientists are doing the best they can at telling the story of where we come from, like our origin story, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think with the James Webb, telescope, it's going to blow our minds, and we're going to have very different numbers and data not too long down the pike. But in the 60s, we started to formulate, okay, the universe is 13.8 billion years, and it's gone through these evolutionary leap moments. And when we look at the patterns of the cosmos, we see beauty, we see elegance, we see complexity, and we see these designs. Like when you think of the hydrogen molecule, it's like against all odds, the proton and the electron find each other when the universe is trillions and trillions of degrees hot and everything's expanding. So against all odds, these subatomic particles find each other and create this, we call it like the first stable center, the first container that then became the basis. Right after that came helium. Then we see hydrogen, helium, and gas becoming these huge billowing clouds. Then with gravity and fusion, we see that coming into galaxies. Inside of galaxies, we see the formation of stars. Some stars give birth to planets. Not all stars give birth to planets, but some do. Some planets give birth to life. Not all planets do, but some do. Ours does. So there's this like incredible wow factor in the universe, but the humans aren't necessarily always talking about it.
Yes.
Right? If we
Yes.
look just to the human story, we can kind of see this like, oh, well, there's been 8,000 plus wars. There's all this fighting happening. There's all these isms and these things that separate. And then there's trauma and kind of like, if you just look to the human story, it looks pretty grim in some ways. But when we look at the origins and the creativity and the against all odds nature of the universe, I believe when we link our own intelligence to that, then we become citizen artists ourselves.
Yes, yes. Great. Wow, you have done a lot of learning and practices, and seems like you're really good about embodiment practices, meaning how do you practice like meditation, dance, and keto contribute to finding meaning and fulfillment in your own life, and how other people can learn and do those kind of things so that they can also find meaning and contentment.
Well, when the world feels chaotic, or a day feels chaotic, or that meeting felt chaotic, or one's thinking feels chaotic, and you consciously choose to step onto the yoga mat or sit onto the meditation cushion or arrive at the dance studio or the dance practice or in the dojo, it's a real moment of deciding to come into this now moment, right? Like exactly how you start your podcast is like being right here, right now, which is the only place healing can happen. It's also, I believe,
Wow.
the place where evolution happens. And we talk about in cosmology, we talk about this quality of emergence. So the more present we are and the more present we are together, we actually get to tune our attention, our awareness, our body, our cells into what's wanting to emerge right here. And that's a pretty creative space. That's a pretty amazing place. Like we don't actually have to know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like showing up is a phenomenal way of participating in this bigger evolutionary thrust that's happening. And I believe that it's these practices that encourage us to line up. Our chakras line up, our body systems line up, our head, heart, and hands line and feet line up in the same place.
Yes, yes.
It's a very powerful
Mm-hmm.
place to be, right? The
Yes,
research says that, we can increase our income, we can increase our friend group. It, and social engagement is really a huge part of well-being. And it's the amount of time we dedicate to being present, either through meditation or contemplative practices, that actually has the most sway on our experience of contentment, happiness, well-being. So much more fun, isn't it?
yes. That's my favorite part, meditation, yoga, and some people think that meditation is so easy. Some people think, oh, you're just lazy and sitting and closing your eyes. And then I say, well, if it's easy, you sit down and close eyes, don't move for 1 hour. I'll give you $100 if you complete within 1 hour, not moving, just sitting and closing your
Mm,
eyes. And
mm-hmm,
people can't do it. Say like, it's so
mm,
hard. So I'm not
right.
lazy.
You're not lazy. No, it actually takes effort.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness, it's
it's
one of the
effort.
hardest things to do
Mm,
if
mm,
you are not well trained. So,
yeah.
so coming back to this, your background as a Western woman, then your travel and understanding of the Eastern psychology, and how you're one of the rare combinations who understand West and Eastern, how that has shaped in your holistic approach towards life and well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you be willing to ask that again, or
Sure. Yeah. Yes. Yes. How? Because you have this. Because Western is very good about human psychology in terms of approaching from science, right?
Mm,
Human behaviors. Eastern philosophy is slightly different, right? They don't really talk about, for example, human behavior in terms of the psychology and science, but they do like meditation, yoga, prayers,
Yes.
right? All of that. So how these two combine help you to approach more
Mm.
holistic
Oh,
healing
yes.
towards people?
Thank you. I love that. I have a better sense of what you're saying. Yeah, I love that. I would say, right, the Yoga Sutras, when we look at the Yoga Sutras, we see the phrase know thyself hundreds of times. When we look at the more Western spiritual text called the Bible, evidently it's written once. So I think in the West, we've had this kind of dominate the external world approach, dominate or master the external world. And in the East, we see a very different orientation. It's know thyself, master the internal world, right? And I love both.
Yeah.
I think,
Yes.
that we are in a very, very incredibly beautiful time where the stakes are really high in terms of our environment, in terms of other species, relying on our human capacity to protect them. Our decision making is impacting, the waters, the skies, the
Yes.
soil, the future. And cultures have been at stake for a long time, but everything is in a high stakes place. And and I think there's more individual human empowerment and more conscious relating and conscious community possibly than ever before in human history, because we have Zoom and the internet and ways to connect across and around the country. And we have these tools, right? Like I remember learning the story of the Dalai Lama, and he's 16. It's what, 1954, 1956. And he gets woken up in the middle of the night and asked, the Chinese are coming to Tibet. Would you like to stay or would you like to go? And he said, let's go. And they migrated across the Himalayas into the northern part of India. What that eventually ended up meaning for the world was this huge dissemination of these internal, introspective, contemplative tools. Right? It's like, so
Wow.
in this massive paradox of like, wow, Tibet will never be the same again. Right? We have a massive nation now moving in to reoccupy or occupy that region of the world. It changes a lot of lives. And it also unleashes the, like Martin Luther King used to say, planetize the movement, right? And it's like in that moment, something shifted in the world, and we were at the beginning of these psychospiritual tools from the East being spread globally. So, Suresh, for me, for example, when I work with a group of like my Women of Wisdom group, which the next one starts in December, it's both how do we turn our attention internally. One of the deepest questions I think for people to be asking right now is where's my level of self-worth? Where on a 0 to 10, where is it? 0, no self-worth, 10, like abundant self-worth. And I think one of the lies that Western civilization inherits through the Adam and Eve origin story is that we're born sinners. This is very different from the Native American origin story, the North American origin story, very different. And I believe that a lot of violence comes from having inherited this story that says you start at nothing in terms of your worth, and you have to spend your entire life trying to earn it through degrees or accolades or wealth or social capital, or right. It's like I feel like a lot of the marketing and the capitalistic agenda is a is a compensation for that. Like, if you buy this, you will have better self-worth. And so I believe we're at a time where we can start to say, actually, self-worth is an inside job. And as individuals, we have the key to determine that level of worth, that level of love and belonging, that level of deservedness. We actually have the key ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yes. I totally believe in that. Going internal, going inward is probably the way to find solution for some of those things. Yeah. Mm.
And then we get to create.
Yes.
We get to go into the doing and into the what are we here to contribute. So
right.
To me, it is that both and.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
where the juicy place is.
Yeah. And now I'm going to talk about a little bit about social impact. Can you discuss the financial aspects of creating and sustaining a social impact project like Cosmogenesis, the story of us? What challenges and rewards have you encountered?
Yeah. So Cosmogenesis is a screenplay and a stage play. And we just got confirmation 2 days ago that we will indeed be producing Cosmogenesis, the stage play, in October of 2025 at this planetarium here in Boulder. So yes, it's yes. Yay. Yeah. I mean, I think money, I grew up equating money with loss. So I spent the first 30 plus years of my life running as fast as I could from it. And then I turned toward it and have since been seeing money more as having enough money, generating enough money so that, for me personally, and I think for others too, so that we can have enough time to be creative. You might see a theme here. I feel like the endeavor of the human is to be creative.
Yes.
And money is one of the non-negotiables in life, like death and money, right? Like we are going to die. We all have an expiration date, and wherever we are, whoever we are, interacting with money in some way is another non-negotiable. So taking it on creatively has been a journey for me. Again, it was something I pushed away for a long time. And since I've started to fall in love with money and in earning money and adding value into my community and being well compensated for that and learning how to invest money and save money, right? And share money. I love gifting. I love making something else possible for another human being or other human beings. To me, it's become a fun aspect of life. And again, it's been a journey for me, but I can say that I am there. And, coming back to Cosmogenesis, my day job, my work as a therapist has supported me while I've been working to bring my creative work to life, which has been all volunteer hours, like thousands and thousands of hours so far on Cosmogenesis, all volunteer. But again, I'm blessed because I'm able to provide for myself so that I have the time to focus on that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, that's great. Of course, you already talked about some of the people who influence in your learning and teaching.
Yes.
And you have studied with many of these centuries greats who has had profound impact on your journey. And who is some of the people you think they have the biggest impact in your journey so far?
Yeah, that's great. I actually, bringing that back to money, I inherited a small amount of money from my grandmother Strong, and I invested it in spending time. My cousin sensibly bought a house with that money, and I went on a kind of a in-person studying retreat after retreat after retreat. So I've studied with Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy is a Buddhist scholar in her 90s who has done a lot of work around the world to bring practices into places that have had ecological devastation. So Chernobyl, Berlin, places like this where there were cultural or ecological impacts, where the people kind of went into a state of freeze. So she cultivated practices that called the work that reconnects, that have helped communities heal and kind of talk about things and come back to life and redirect their resources towards the future they want to create. So I did deep work with Joanna. I've hosted Joanna. Joanna invited me to be the council director for the Council of All Beings on her behalf. So she has impacted me greatly. I've gotten to study with Gabrielle Roth, who invented the five rhythms practice. She was at Esalen back in the 50s and 60s. She discovered nature. She discovered how nature likes to move through the human body, and she liberated hundreds of thousands of classically trained dancers to kind of reconnect with the more organic, natural impulse and flow that wants to move through the body. So I've traveled all over the world studying with her and her son, Jonathan. Bill Plotkin is a man down in Durango, Colorado. He runs an institute called Animas Valley Institute. He trained with a lot of Native Americans and elders in really integrating nature and the human soul, like really looking at what are our cultural tasks, what are our nature tasks that actually inspire a psycho spiritual development. So I spent years studying with Bill. John Powell, who runs the Othering and Belonging Institute out of Berkeley, I've studied with him. He has deeply impacted me. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, a Chicana storyteller. I can't even describe her. She's a psychologist. She wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves. I've had a lot of in-person time with her. And then the person who impacted me the most has been Brian Swim, who's the evolutionary cosmologist. And when I met Brian's work, I was doing a lot of study of embodiment and having kind of transpersonal experiences of connectedness to something bigger than me. And when he came in with the scientific story of the evolution of the universe, it all made sense to me. And I've spent the rest of my life creating a curriculum and a stage play and a screenplay because I believe these intellectual and spiritual tools are really important to keep alive and to make available to young people. I think we have a lot on the horizon that we're going to face financially, ecologically, culturally, socially, and equipping people with tools that will help them, move through chaos in a maybe in a way of celebration, maybe in a way of groundedness, maybe in a way of feeling their love and belonging along the way is going to hopefully get us to a better outcome long term.
What I'm learning so far is that you must have had big visions to get what you are today. And now you already accomplished a lot of things. Now, what are your hopes for the future, both personally and for the world, in terms of love, life, and financial well-being?
Thank you. Well, let's see. I have to say that I am falling in love right now with a human, with a male human that
Great.
is. Thank you. Yeah, it's very generative and grounded and beautiful. And for myself, I hope to, in this next phase of my life, learn more about filmmaking and be able to live as a creator, as a creative person, as a citizen artist, someone who sees the connection between things and sees art as a contribution towards wholeness and towards bringing people together in a good way. So yeah, my hope is to buy a camera for filming in the 360, so that my work is intended to go up onto planetariums and into immersive spaces, and to capture actually therapeutic to make therapeutic films of people's lives, of remarkable stories around the world, of people who are doing things sort of against all odds, but with elegance and grace that are contributing. I hope to travel. I hope to become married. These beautiful things, and that abundance. I believe that financial well-being comes as a reciprocity. I believe everything in nature is looking to be reciprocal, whether it's the tree to the roots, whether it's the parent to the child, whether it's the child to the community. I believe that we come into financial well-being when we are making offerings from the deepest authentic place within us of who we have come to be, and that everyone wants to participate and contribute. And when we have the blessing to do that, we are then reciprocated. We're then supported in being in service of that, and that reciprocity creates well-being. That's been my experience.
Sure. And yes, you're involved with the different projects, your professional, your embodiment practices, and falling in love and all of that. How do you balance your life and career?
I wake up early. I wake up early and I get to it. I do contemplative practice in the morning. I drink coffee and feel really celebrate. I celebrate that. I work to be as deliberate as I can. So, making really clear goals, prioritizing what is mine to focus on, and doing the inner work to sort that through and find that clarity, and daily practice for
Daily
sure.
practice, sure.
Yeah, and having grace when I need to just swing in the hammock after a long day of work and kind of just be in the elements. And so, yeah, I think overall there's a balance. Like if we're trying to hit a balance every single day, I think it's too much to ask of ourselves. But if we look at a bigger arc, if we take our lives with a bigger arc, we don't know our expiration date, but if we can relax around that and do our best every day and be as deliberate as we can, and kind of in the bigger picture balance it out, it balances out.
So what advice do you have for younger people who are figuring out how to find meaning in their own lives or in meaning in other people's life?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for based on your own experience and trials and tribulations, your travel and experiment in different things? What has worked for you, and what advice do you have for younger people who are looking for meaning in their own lives?
Yeah, I think that question really touches me. It brings tears to my eyes. Yeah, I would say, first of all, find an ally, whether it's your grandmother, your dog, your friend's mother, a teacher. Find someone who believes in you and take that to heart. Like, find an ally so that you get out of the hole of aloneness, right? Like lonely. I think lonely, if I could kick one emotion off the planet, it would be loneliness. I think, we know that it's an epidemic. We know that social media is contributing to it. and it's also completely unnecessary. With more people on the planet than ever, right? With more ways to engage than ever. So I would say find an ally and don't keep them at a distance. Like really turn and look at your life and ask who believes in me. Maybe it's a friend you only see once a month, but who is this person who doesn't criticize me, who's not trying to, kind of hold me back somehow, who doesn't shame me, but who actually gets me. And it does not matter who it is. This does not have to be someone in your family. It does not have to make sense. This could be, service person that works in your school. But find someone and admit to yourself that they love you and start opening the ears and the doors of your heart and start letting that love in. And then allow that to inspire a little more health in your system, more confidence, more courage, and then seek some mentors, right? Start building your circle of allies. So within the next 3 to 6 months, you have 4 solid people in your life that get you, that guide you, that help steer your direction, that are putting good things into your universe. That would be first.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And,
can I say one more
sure,
piece
of course.
there?
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you have any creative vision or impulse inside, like, oh, I want to make that. I just have this instinct that, like I work with this with clients all the time. Like I'm in this department, but I know my work is over there, but there isn't a clear path and I don't know if they'll accept me. It's like, you got to go for that. So I believe that the universe plants desire inside the human heart, and that that it's unique in each of us. Every human being is unique. And that the path of life, the spiritual path, is cultivating know thyself. Know thyself is, what are the desires in my heart? And then doing everything you can to follow that, enhance that. And the things that diminish that, draw boundaries. It's like Brian Swim talks about centration, a power of the universe. So welcoming, like a good cell wall knows what to welcome and what to keep out. So the things that enhance that desire, the things that expand that desire, the things that feed and fill that desire, maybe it's a film class, maybe it's a certain kind of art supply, maybe it's a conversation with a podcaster that you admire, right? Like
yes.
To cultivate that, to move towards that, to have the courage. I believe courage is the most central of the virtues, right? When we have courage, we take risks on behalf of this desire or this vision inside of us that comes from something bigger than us, and that gives us the power for the next step and the next step and the next step. And to have clear boundaries. If something is starting to contract that for you, then also the courage to push that farther to the periphery in love, in grace, and in clarity.
Yeah.
So that, I believe, is the spiritual path. And that would be my advice to young people, is that we need you. The universe cannot be itself until you are yourself. And against all odds, all of this prevails. So against the odds of climate change, against the odds of racism, against the odds of sexism, against the odds of the U.S. current political, what do we call that, right? Against all odds, there's something deeper and bigger that prevails. And when we link ourselves to that wisdom, intelligence, power, energy, something else gets to happen with our lives that's quite magical and miraculous, and to have faith in that. I'm a testimony of that. I'm here to say that this is possible, and
yes.
to trust that, to cultivate it, to go for it.
Wow. Yes. So with your work, your wisdom, your experience, your generosity, your love, your kindness, how people can find you? Where?
Right back at you, Suresh. Thank you for your generosity and warmth and kindness and wisdom. What a great question. If you want to come do a Women of Wisdom course with me, or come do an internal family systems EMDR informed intensive, and you want to come to Boulder, you can find me at strongsolutionsTherapy.com. strongsolutionsTherapy.com. If you would like to somehow be a part of our Cosmogenesis, the story of us, stage play and film, if you have extra funds that you would like to contribute, we are trying to secure 2 Canadian filmmakers right now that will help us knock our story out of the park. You can find us at cosmogenesisfilm.com, cosmogenesisfilm.com.
How much money you have to raise for that project?
The first phase or the full phase?
Full phase, yeah.
The full phase, we're guessing about $350,000 to produce the film. To get the director and the 2 filmmakers started, we need 47,000. Yeah.
You have a deadline for 47? Or first deadline or second deadline, sort of?
First one, actually, we need to raise 50% of 47,000 by July. So I'm headed to Berlin next month to an International Planetarium Society conference, and in order to secure these 2 filmmakers, what's half of 47? 23 and a half, something like that. 23 and a half by July, and by July 12th, hopefully that gives us 2 weeks.
Yes.
So cosmogenesisfilm.com, you can go to the link and make a tax-deductible donation to the Fisk Planetarium Fund. And if you write "in honor of Cosmogenesis, the story of us," that money, you will get an immediate email followed up by a tax exemption letter. So that can go right into your resources, and the money you contribute will go to securing our filmmakers, and we will actually start pre-production this fall. And for the stage play, we're doing pre-production starting in the spring. So yeah, but securing these guys for next year would guarantee that Lotus's story gets to reach the young people around the world.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So for all the listeners, this is the time to open your wallet and contribute towards this cause, and so that we can continue this work and passion of Rebecca Sophia Strong. So thank you, Rebecca Sophia, again. What a delight to have a conversation with you, as always. Every time I talk to you, I leave with more energy. So that means 2 things. You're passionate about what you do, because that's the only way people get more energy. So you talk so passionately that it gives passion to the audience. So we also leave with more energy.
Excellent. That's the best. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So we're going to close with a quick meditation. Is that okay with you? Yeah.
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Sure. Well, close your eyes again. 3 breaths. Inhale from nose and exhale from mouth. Send good intention and loves to all the peoples and all beings in the world, and send love to the person you love, and receive love from that person and other people, so that we can grow in harmony together. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnet. It's been an incredible conversation exploring the depths of love, life, and money with our guest, Rebecca Sophia Strong. Rebecca Sophia's insights and experiences have illuminated the path from chaos to cosmos, showing us how to amplify health, intelligence, and vision towards a flourishing future for all. Her work as a visionary artist, trauma resolution psychotherapist, and social impact storyteller has inspired us to seek deeper meaning in our own lives. You can explore Rebecca Sophia's transformative work further at www.strongsolutionstherapy.com and www.cosmogenesisfilm.com. Please visit her website and get to know even further, deeper understanding of what she does. Please visit my website at sureshbasnet.com and follow this podcast on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube. Please join our community on Facebook, and thank you for listening again. Until next time, wherever you are, have a great time. Thank you.